Hey, welcome to the show. Glad you could be with us. Today's topic, I think it's a positive topic. Something I've been thinking about for a little while. Sorry for the camera motion here, just adjusting stuff. But anyway, something I've been thinking about for a while. And see, I have some notes here. Basically, I have four kids. Four, yeah, there you go. I have four kids. They're all adults now, thank God. Um, I'm not sure that I am, but they're doing okay. And so I think, and I've thought a lot about being a parent for many years, because I was a parent for many years, and my kids came really fast. They're like 1.5 or 2 years apart, every one of them. And so it was like constant diapers, and it was just, it was just being a parent. It was a full time thing. And so I got into it pretty intense, ended up getting really into their education and did unusual, different education for them. Kind of a broad mix of educational styles and types and formal and informal. And I hope it worked. I hope it was the right approach. At minimum, I didn't want them to be repressed and suppressed the way I feel like the old system does. And I felt like the old system, the old education system that we still have, did to me. I didn't want that. So I was driven really for them to have different experiences. And I gave them different experiences. For 2 years, they were out of traditional school and we were traveling based out of Texas. And we were traveling around North America, Canada, and the US. And Texas has very moderate educational laws. And we were able to try unschooling, some more traditional homeschooling, but mostly unschooling. Frankly, we just spent a lot of time visiting national parks, visiting or Native American or Indian, depends on the nation, reservations, historical sites, scientific sites, lots of museums, and dinosaur museums, several of those. Meteor crater in Arizona, Mount St. Helens in Washington State. We saw a lot of natural history, a lot of natural science locations live. We were there. And so basically, they were getting an education by hands on. And we didn't, I think we went to one, water park. I mean, we didn't do that kind of thing that much, although I have nothing against it. It was fun. But mainly we were focused on seeing the world and especially seeing America and Canada. And we had a great time. And that was 2 years when my youngest was just old enough to kind of understand what was going on. And my oldest was not so old that they were bored to death and wanting to be back with their friends. So it was kind of I knew that we had a window of opportunity and we needed to seize it, and we did. So education, from my standpoint, with kids was a big deal. I wanted them to have a really unusual. My experience with education, I've talked about that before in another program. But my experience with education was traditional public school, and I fell through the cracks. I was, 98th, 99th percentile on standardized tests, and I was a mediocre student. I fell through the cracks. I did not want that to happen to my kids. So I was driven. But one of the things that I've noticed, among today's kids, one of the things that's really frustrated me with this generation of young people has been, and it really upsets me, really, is kind of a sense of entitlement. They're difficult to work with if you're from earlier generations sometimes. But at the same time, as I spent time watching them and observing them, not just my kids, but lots of young people, my kids' friends, just seeing people out and about and listening to what's going on in the world, the conclusion that I came to was that a lot of the problems, or what I see are as problems with the younger generation today, is because they don't feel any inspiration. They don't see a future. When they watch the media all their life, they've grown up in a world that seemed to be in decline. and that was their world. And they didn't look forward to being an adult because they saw being an adult as being a struggle because their parents, in most cases, have struggled through recessions, declines, the '08 crash. And our family was no different. We were doing booming, and then we went through the '08 crash, and it just crushed us. So my kids saw the same thing. We were able to maintain a comfortable lifestyle for them, but it was really mirrors. I mean, it wasn't, we didn't really have money. We were stuck with some real beautiful real estate that we couldn't sell. So we ended up living in it, and thought they were rich, but they weren't because we had a huge debt. So anyway, they lived a good life, a comfortable life. But, I think in general, they never looked forward to growing up. I mean, they saw growing up as being bad. And yet, in other ways, they grew up very fast. I mean, with the internet, and all of them were connected from a very young age. And originally, my attitude, this was the early days of the internet, was I'm not big on trying to be really controlling. And I felt like it might be better if they I didn't make everything taboo so that they were trying to. I mean, I never made a lot of things taboo that traditional parents do. And I felt like as a result, my kids never smoked. My kids aren't into alcohol or drugs. And I felt like that was because I never made them taboo. I just told them my opinion, which was that cigarettes stink and they're bad for you and they'll kill you someday. Other drugs, all they do is numb you. And if you're needing to numb yourself, let's talk. What's going on? And alcohol's the same story, and it makes you do stupid stuff, and it tastes like gasoline. And basically, they agreed with me, and that was the end of it. So and that was my biggest fear with my kids, is that they would get in trouble with mainly drugs or alcohol, and that no matter how smart they were or how well they were raised, it would destroy them. And I told them that from a young age. But anyway, I think young people today, because they've grown up in this environment of, a world that's constantly feeling in decline, in conflict, that they don't see a great future for themselves. And as a result, they don't feel a lot of motivation to do stuff. The jobs that are open to them, the traditional startup jobs, which are perfectly fine. You can't really live off working at a McDonald's, but it's a start. It teaches you how to make money. It teaches you how to budget. And if you have a family at home that can help you, then you can use that as a jumping point to bigger and better things. But they just look at it as, what's the point? I'm never going to get ahead. It's going to be a lifelong struggle, just like my parents. I'm going to get a relationship and then I'll get divorced. And, they've seen so many bad things and they hear so many bad things on the internet. They grow up so fast. Their exposure to porn makes them grow up very quickly, and I think they handle it surprisingly well in some ways, but in other ways, I just think it really, without sounding like grandma, a lot of their childhood has been stolen. Because a big part of being a child is believing anything is possible, the sort of fantasy, the Disney ideas. And of course, some of that causes problems, especially in young girls. They have ideas that relationships are Disney relationships and then the real ones aren't. And then they have to unlearn that. So sometimes that can be a negative. But still, the idea that anything is possible is what makes life magical. And magic in life is what makes life worth living. Otherwise, it's just drudgery. And so I think because of the environment that these young people have grown up in, they have lost the magic. They don't have inspiration. They don't believe in the future. And therefore, they don't have a lot of reason to do much of anything, to participate in society, to give a damn about anything. They either pursue pleasure, they pursue numbness through drugs and alcohol, or they just go wandering off and don't know what the hell they're doing. So it's a shame. And there's really no leadership. And this is, to some extent, this stuff is true for adults. And whenever you have situations where countries or the world is in a struggling period and is kind of in a malaise of this kind, if you want to use that Jimmy Carter term from many years ago, you open up the possibility to have, demagogues and dictators come in and make all kinds of promises. I mean, that's what brought Hitler into Germany. He made lots of promises. He started off by keeping some of them, and people believed in him. And then before you know it, he was in power, and that's when he really got ugly. So that's always been a risk. It's always a risk in any free country. And of course, the kids are our future. They're the ones that are going to make the decisions for the future. Luckily, they are also extremely skeptical, so they're less likely to buy into a demagogue. But that doesn't give us a future because they're just kind of laying there saying, "I don't care," would it, what up? They're kind of a typical teenager attitude of, whatever. And obviously, you can't build much of a future that way. So I started writing down thoughts I had about the fact that young people desperately need to be inspired because there are situations in which you have powerful inspiration for young people and they go from this malaise, this lackadaisical, this I don't give a damn attitude to snapping in line and fighting with everything they've got. They've got the same energy in them that the greatest generation had. They just it hasn't been brought out in the right way. That's what I believe. So I wrote down a few thoughts. These are going to sound kind of generic, but actually they are very powerful. And I think they're the key to, if we can give these tools to this generation, we can save the future. Small little goal there. The first thing I said was expect excellence from people, then reward that excellence generously. So there's an interesting perspective. Excellence, we hear the word a lot. What is excellence? Excellence is the best you can possibly give. And this is, historical figures are being trashed these days. But when we look back in history, every one of them, they're famous for a reason. And a lot of them did some really powerfully good things, even if they had some bad parts about them. One example is Henry Ford. I mean, there were things about Henry Ford that weren't nice. But you know what? There were some things he did right. And one of the things he did right was he stood out from his competitors. He stood out from the crowd. He was extremely tough on his employees in that they had to be on time. If they weren't on time, they were a minute late, they got fired. And that was bad because, he was operating in a time when it was hard to get good jobs. And a lot of people were coming in from rural areas and were competing for these jobs. But he was very tough on his employees about time because in his business, everything was on the clock. This was the industrial age, and its entire production line was based on time and everything arriving logistically at just the right time and being installed at just the right time and everything, so time was everything. But in return for them being on time, them working hard and producing an excellent product, he paid his employees double what his competitors did, exactly 2 times the going rate. He didn't have to do that, but he did it because he wanted his people to be superb. My dad used to tell me, you don't have to be the best that can possibly be. You only have to be a little bit better than everybody else. And if you are just a little bit better than everybody else, you will not make a little bit more. You will make double. You will make a lot more. That's the reality in today's world. So he was demanding that they produce better, a little bit better than everyone else by giving their all. And in exchange, he was doubling their pay. They were really being rewarded. Their families were living better. Their life was better. So it was a fair exchange, in my view. And that's the kind of model that I'm talking about, the idea of rewarding excellence generously. Nobody wants to work for minimum wage. Nobody wants to be the cheapest. What young people want and need is to be generously rewarded. And they're spoiled to some extent, and they expect that. But they have to understand if they want that generous reward, then they need to be a part of an entity, a team, really, that is producing real excellence. And then they'll deserve it. So that's the first thing. Excellence, expect excellence, and then reward that excellence generously. And then I used the word expect excellence. I said, ordinary people will rise or slouch to the level that you expect from them. This is a big deal. And in some ways, we've tried to get a lot of the competitive aspects, like in our education, they've been taken out because it was seen as making people who fell behind feel really bad. And it probably did. And there's a lot more emphasis on cooperation. And I think in the information age, cooperation is probably a more, maybe even more important than competition. But they're both important things to learn and to master: the ability to compete and the ability to cooperate with others. But ultimately, in an effort to reduce the amount of emphasis on competition, we lowered the standards in general for everybody. In some ways, we lower the standards, like in education, for example, to the level of the lowest, the slowest. What that does is it bores the heck out of everybody else. Or then you'll have one class for the upper people, and then you create a class system, us and them. And the truth is, every kid is unique, and every adult is unique. And when you have a system that applies mass solutions to individual issues like how people learn or how people produce in a workplace, then you're always going to have a poor fit, and you're going to have people who are left behind. So, but once again, the result of this has been, by lowering the standards in general in order to not upset the people who are not as good a performer, people have slouched to the level that we're expecting from them. And they're underperforming. They're not excited. They're bored to death. And they're numbed. So no wonder they get into drugs and alcohol. They're used to being numbed. And numbing is, they're going through life trying not to feel, because the feelings they have are just deathly boredom. I struggle with boredom, horrible boredom in my life as I was a young person. It's a powerful force. And it shows a curiosity. It shows that someone has a desire to grow and to learn, and that for whatever reason, they are not being led in their direction, so that they can find ways to use that boredom energy towards creativity and imagination and that sort of thing. But so that's one of them. People will slouch to the level you expect from them. So instead, like I said, expect excellence. Raise the level of expectation in general for young people. Expect a lot. Okay? Now you can already see possible negatives of expecting a lot from people. What happens when they fail? Well, we'll deal with that. This is where I address that. Do not confuse excellence with perfection. This is a biggie, because I think people do. People confuse excellence with perfection. Remember what I said? My dad always told me that you don't have to be, twice as good as everybody else. You just have to be a little bit better than everybody else. That's a really important thing to remember. That's the distinction between excellence and perfection. And today, I think most young people, a lot of adults, when they hear excellence, they hear perfection. Do not confuse excellence with perfection. Never, never idolize perfection. Okay? Now, this sounds like it goes against some people's advice, Aim for perfection and you'll get as best as you can be. Well, I say never idolize perfection, because that's poisonous. Because no one is perfect. And no one will be inspired by perfection, only shamed and intimidated. As soon as you expect perfection, the vast majority of people who aren't going to drive themselves into the ground trying to achieve perfection are going to immediately realize, I know I'm not perfect. And I'm faking it half the time, because a lot of people are. The imposter syndrome is a common thing. And they feel like they're faking it. Well, most of us are, to some degree, pretending that we're really, really good at something when we're just ordinary people doing the best we can. And so we stop trying. Why try when you know you can't get there? So instead of expecting perfection or allowing excellence and perfection to be confused, make it clear that perfection is not expected. And how do you do that? You do that by always tolerating failure. Okay? Because perfection, in theory, doesn't have failure, right? But excellence always has failure. Okay, here's the difference. Failure is a natural and inevitable result of striving. So is success. Success is a natural and inevitable result of striving. You cannot have success without failures. Usually far more failures than successes. And if you're doing things right, your successes will far outweigh the impact of your failures. So failure, instead of, people doing the loser kind of crap, and there's an attitude in our culture, especially among young people, to really jump on people who fail and to shame people who fail. That is a very caustic, dangerous cultural poison. So I've talked about two things that are poison. Idolizing perfection is poison, and shaming failure is poison. Those two things are poison. And so it's critical that we eliminate those from our culture, from our education, from the way we deal with our kids, from the way we deal with employees and friends. Perfection, expecting perfection is poison, and shaming failure is poison. Instead, we should celebrate failure. Sometimes you go into restaurants and you'll hear someone in the back drop a plate and it shatters. And in some of these restaurants, I've often heard the whole crew will start clapping and laughing. And that's making something very clear. You're working hard. Stuff happens. Plates drop. No biggie. Yay. Just celebrate that we're all alive. We're okay. And we lost another plate. We'll get a new one. No biggie. And that's a great example of how to celebrate failure in a healthy way. It doesn't mean that you're trying to break plates. It just means that no one's going to be shamed for it. Because if you're breaking plates, it's because you're doing something. And Churchill said something similar. He said, do you have enemies? Good. It means you're doing something. Well, in this case, do you have failure? Good. It means you're doing something. It's the same kind of thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Failure is a sign that you're making an effort, and making an effort is the key to success. And in my opinion, the ultimate key to success is persistence. Trying persistently and using your head while you're doing it, adjusting as you go. If you keep persisting, you don't let failure stop you, and you focus, eventually the world, the universe, whatever, will help you, or at minimum, it will get out of your way and let you have your way, because the world doesn't have the desire to stop people if they're persistent enough, because it's too much work. They'll get out of your way and let you have what you want. But if you aren't persistent, they'll just stand there and block you, whatever they are. So if you want something, you simply have to determine that you're going to get it, and don't stop until you get it. And failure is not important. So that was some of the biggest points that I came up with. I had a few other thoughts that I came up with in the same area. Be the best that you can be a model for others. So for adults, role models, remember that we're a model for young people. And if we are okay with doing half-ass work, if we don't have high standards for ourselves, if our work is not our trademark, is not a reflection of us that we leave behind wherever we go, then they're going to see that, and they're not going to have a desire for craftsmanship and quality either. But if you want excellence in the world, one of the best ways to have it is to make sure that no matter where you go or what you do, you leave behind you a trail of excellence of what you do, your craftsmanship, whether you're cutting grass, building furniture, it doesn't matter. Do it your way, and in a way that you know is your trademark. We know that you were here because look how beautiful it is, or look how much quality it is, or look how well it works, whatever it is you do. Let's see. So another thought I had was to never tolerate entitlement. No one is entitled to anything except the freedom to choose, the freedom to act, and the freedom to be. And of course, today, a lot of young people have an entitled attitude. And I think if they're inspired, a lot of that would go away. I think it would vaporize. I think the entitlement is just a fallback. They think they're playing the game, they're playing the system because they see the system as just a smaller and smaller pie that everyone's fighting over. No one's creating anything of value or new. No one really cares. This is a negative way of seeing the world. People are nasty and awful. And, I don't give a damn. And I'm going to get my part. And the way to get my part is to fight and steal and grab it any way I can. So that's where entitlement comes from. It also comes from adults just spoiling their kids. But it's important that we teach and we communicate that you don't have a right to much. You know, I said you have the right to act, the right to do things, as long as you're not violating others' right to do the same. You have the freedom to be, to just exist. You have a right to be you. And finally, you have a right to choose. You have a right to make choices about what you want to do or not do. And whenever those are restricted, that's when your freedoms are violated. But those are your rights. Beyond that, you're not entitled to much. And finally, another thought I had was to love and embrace our uniqueness and make the most of everyone's best gifts, because this is where people come into their own. Inspire everyone to better the parts of themselves that they do not like, but don't judge them for those parts. So obviously we want to inspire people to improve themselves, especially the parts of themselves that they don't like about themselves, parts of themselves that get in their way, the self-destructive parts. But also we want to embrace people's uniqueness and realize it's important for especially young people to know that what other people might think is weird may be your greatest value. It may be the best thing you bring to this world. So if you're a bit weird, that's probably your special gift. And you may end up focusing on that and living that. And there's probably somebody out there who doesn't think it's weird. They think it's awesome. So those are the thoughts I had about, the kind of information that young people need. I told you a lot of it is going to sound, traditional, conventional. And it is. You've heard it all before, no doubt. But young people need inspiration. Those are the kind of messages they need, but they need it delivered in a way that makes them want to be a part of something. It would be great if we had some kind of mass efforts going on. Of course, that would lend itself to wars and government, games. That's what Hitler did. He got everybody involved in the mass excitement of starting World War II. Ultimately, that's what it turned out to be. We don't want that. But we want our young people to get excited about the future and about being a part of it and about the role they can play in creating the future. And the way you do that, I think, is by inspiring them. You inspire them by explaining to them and showing them how they can fit into the new world, how they can play an exciting new part, and how they can see the impact of what they do and the difference they make in this world. And finally, also, how they can be rewarded generously and do very well and not have to worry about how they're going to survive. Because if they perform with excellence, there are places they can go and things they can do that will reward them generously. So that's the kind of guidance and inspiration that I think young people need. And I've thought about trying to deliver something like that myself, and I'm toying with it. And, we'll see where it goes. So anyway, that's my program for today. Appreciate you coming to join the show. It's been fun, and I'm kind of excited about this. We'll see where it goes. So anyway, thanks for coming, and have a great day.